My husband was cold towards me personally, but he still showered our daughter with lots of fatherly love and care. I put up with his ridiculous behavior towards me for her sake. One day, I happened to overhear him talking with my daughter over the phone. My daughter had her own kid's phone so that she could let me know when she was finished with her piano lessons. My daughter, not knowing how to use her phone completely just yet, had accidentally put her father on speaker, and his voice was pretty loud enough so that I could hear everything he said from outside the room.
You put the powder in Mommy's food, all right?
I was shell-shocked. I didn't remember doing anything that aggravated him so much that he saw me fit to be drugged as punishment. And I couldn't believe he was asking his own child to do such an atrocious thing. I was too shocked to do anything that evening, and decided I ought to wait until when my husband came home to maybe do something about it. However, he never came home until very early the next day, and I found that I had fallen asleep before then. That same morning, he suddenly collapsed at breakfast. My daughter opened her eyes wide and muttered something that changed everything. This is the story of how my husband's coldness toward me was actually far, far more than that, and how my life was both saved and made better by giving me the perfect chance to exact my revenge on him, by the same person. My name is Eileen, and I'm a 35-year-old housewife. I married my husband Scott 10 years ago. He and I were classmates turned couple in university, and after we graduated, we discussed how we wanted to move forward with our lives. He'd gotten a pretty good job in a prominent company as a product designer, and I was planning to study abroad as part of a recruitment program for an NGO dedicated to revitalizing the local natural environment. We both wanted to stay together, and after quite a long, tiresome session of negotiations, we decided that he would accept his job and that I would do freelance work while taking care of the home. After a while of talking, I'd found an ad online that said they were recruiting bilingual English and Japanese speakers for jobs in translation. And because I had the N1 level in the Japanese language proficiency test, it didn't take long to be hired after applying for the job. And that's how we decided we would live our life. 3 years later, we tied the knot. I became a mother of one. My daughter, Zelda, was about to start elementary school in the spring. She had been begging to start piano lessons this spring vacation, so I gave her a kid's cell phone as a birthday present so that she could be in touch with me before and after her lessons. Look, Zelda, if you press this button, it will open your email. And if you have an emergency and really need to call me, this is the button to press, okay?
Okay, Mommy. I learned some things looking at you and your phone.
That's good. And Zelda?
I'll do my best in lessons, Mommy.
Seeing her smile like that, the corners of my mouth quivered as I realized how fast my lovely daughter was growing up. In this way, my days with my daughter were always happy and fun. However, life wasn't without its problems. The truth is, my relationship with Scott started to deteriorate after perhaps 5 years. Perhaps the time he became really busy, trying to get that promotion was when his job started demanding a lot more from him. He had been under a lot of stress at work for years, and he had been acting cold to me more and more.
Hey, the house is a mess. What's the point of your being a housewife, eh? You've been slacking off anyway, haven't you? That stupid freelance job is taking you away from your real responsibilities. You're so useless, you stupid bitch.
These were the kinds of words I heard come out of his mouth every day. I began to see glimpses of Scott's inherent arrogance, and he stopped saying kind words to me altogether. I felt as if he had completely lost interest in me. In addition, during more recent months, Scott had been going out for drinks with his work colleagues and coming home very late a lot more often. In the beginning, I used to complain about him eating out pretty constantly. We had a tradition that dinner would be eaten together as a family every night, and him being away when he didn't have to made me feel like he didn't care about Zelda anymore. But over time, I grew used to it, mainly because I could enjoy eating dinner with my daughter without him saying his usual negativity, and I was totally fine with that. When I told the story to my friends, who were mothers of children from Zelda's class at school, they unanimously told me to get rid of such a pathetic excuse of a husband. Under normal circumstances, I would naturally oblige. Such a husband would be better off done and divorced more than anything else. However, I could not break off the relationship with Scott so easily. And that was because even though I did say he was so cold towards me, he was very affectionate and caring towards Zelda and seemed to care for her very much.
Hey, sweetie, are you working on that workbook I bought you for spring break?
I finished all of it, Daddy.
Oh, really? Dang, you finished it so quickly. That's great. Zelda, I'm really proud of you. Here, I bought you one of your favorite chocolates as a reward for a job well done.
Zelda seemed to love her daddy very much, and that's why I put up with my husband's cold attitude. As long as my daughter was happy, it didn't matter to me. One day, after I finished dinner with my daughter without my husband, who was still working at that point, I was going to the balcony to take in the laundry to fold it. Zelda's room was situated between the balcony outside and the living room, and just as I was about to walk past her room, I heard some kind of conversation coming from her room. It sounded like she was on the phone with someone. From the way she was talking, it sounded like her daddy was on the other end of the line. I wondered why he was calling her at this hour. I did mention he was working late. Perhaps he had something urgent to tell her. I stopped in front of my daughter's room, a little curious. I had told my daughter to text me when her lessons were over, but I had not seen her use the phone very often. So I guess she wasn't used to using it. She had accidentally had Scott on speakerphone, and his voice was pretty loud. Loud enough so that I could hear everything he said from outside the room. Then, suddenly I heard my husband's voice in the phone, blaring out even louder.
Daddy, what's going on? Did your voice get louder?
No, it's not louder, sweetie.
That's weird.
That is weird. Anyway, listen up, honey. This is important.
Yeah, Daddy. What is it?
The words that Scott's voice uttered from there on out left me utterly speechless.
Put the powder in Mommy's food, okay? Daddy will give you the medicine next time.
Medicine? What's that? Is it okay to do that?
Daddy says it's okay, sweetie, so of course it's okay. If you're a good girl and you do what I say, I'll buy you whatever you want.
Really?
Yes, really. Candy, games, toys, whatever you want.
What kind of medicine was Scott talking about? I had no damn idea, but from the sound of his voice, it was clear it couldn't be something good. I was absolutely shell-shocked by this point, because I knew that his recent coldness towards me, my husband still loved me. I also didn't remember doing anything that aggravated him so much that he saw me fit to be drugged as punishment. And last but not least, I couldn't believe he was asking his own daughter to do such an atrocious thing.
But I don't want to do anything weird to Mommy.
Zelda seemed to realize that something about what Scott was saying was wrong. Even at a young age, she had a good deal of common sense, and she also learned a lot from books. She was normally a very sweet, obedient, understanding little darling who rarely rebelled, but on this occasion, she was unusually defiant towards her father. I could feel the tension in my daughter's voice, but Scott paid no attention to that.
If you don't listen to me, I'm not going to buy you any more candy and chocolates. And I'm going to take your phone away, too.
No, I don't want that.
Well then, be good and do as I say.
But I don't want to put medicine in Mommy's food either.
And so, the exchange went on for a painfully long time. Zelda's voice grew increasingly tearful. I couldn't bear to listen anymore, nor could I let her father put her through this emotional trauma. I put my hand on the doorknob of her room, and that's when it happened.
Oh, forget it. What a pain in the stupid ass. I'll do it.
I heard my husband yell.
Oh, okay, Daddy.
But you have to promise me that you won't tell Mommy or anyone else about this. You understand?
Yes, Daddy, I promise.
Okay. Good girl. I gotta go now, sweetie. Good night. Sleep tight. And don't let the bed bugs bite.
Then I heard a beeping sound that told me the call had ended. I was so shocked that I didn't move for a while. I was about to open the door, but when I thought about it, I didn't know what to say to my daughter in this situation at all. It was late anyhow, so I decided to spend the night thinking about the situation, and by the next morning, I would definitely calm down and talk to Zelda. But first, I thought I should ask my husband about the phone call. That's what I thought. I waited for him to come home that night, thinking about everything that had transpired mere minutes earlier. I was honestly fed up with his attitude by that point, and that he was trying to kill me with these drugs of his was quite literally the last thing I expected. I didn't remember him being so malicious in the near 15 years I'd known him. Not once did he get violent with objects around the house. Not once did he ever hit me or anyone else. And not once did he ever raise his voice to children in general, Zelda especially. Had I done something to offend him so deeply, he thought that resorting to potentially criminal action was the way to make things between us without realizing it? There was that one time I'd given him food poisoning when I served him scallops that had apparently gone bad, but nowadays we remember that memory rather fondly. Did he actually resent me for giving him a hard time for the better part of a month or so? Or was it all just my paranoid mind misunderstanding everything, and that the medicine was for my hay fever or something like that? No matter how much I thought about it, I could not find the answer. In the end, no matter how long I waited that night, he didn't come home. Before I knew it, midnight was already in the past, and I fell asleep, not knowing that the next morning, the incident that would change everything occurred. I laid out breakfast for the three of us, as usual, and went to Zelda's room to wake her up. It was a seemingly normal morning when I heard the sound of the alarm clock in my husband's room. But when Zelda and I returned to the living room, he took one look at us and sprinted into the bathroom, appearing to avoid us. After yesterday's incident with my daughter, I was actually a little wary of my husband, and maybe he was wary of us too. Perhaps he thought that Zelda had broken her promise to keep things between them, and perhaps he suspected I knew about the powder, as he called it. I did imply that I would probably know how to talk to my daughter after a night's rest, but the truth was that I didn't even know how to look at my daughter, let alone talk to her. I couldn't remember what kind of conversation we were having at this time of the morning, even though it should have been the same as usual. There was an awkward silence between the two of us while I was getting the glasses from the cupboard to pour in the orange juice. After putting the orange juice on the table, I gathered my courage and looked at Zelda's face, and she too looked as though she lacked her usual energy. "What's wrong, darling? Are you feeling a little sick?" I may have sounded a bit too stressed. My voice croaked multiple times as I called to Zelda.
I have a bit of a tummy ache, Mommy.
"Oh, really? I'll go get you some medicine." With that, I got up from my seat and went to the kitchen to look for the medicine I always kept in case she had something wrong. We had an assortment of pills for coughs and headaches and stomach aches, decongestion, bandages, and many more things in a large first aid kit. But for some reason, it wasn't where I had left it last. I wondered where I put it. Ah, there it is. About the same time I found the box, Scott came back from the bathroom. He walked faster than usual to get to the table and started eating his breakfast with gusto, as if he didn't want to see me or Zelda at all. "Here's your medicine, darling." When I called out to her from behind her back, she jolted as though I had startled her. "I'm sorry, honey, did I startle you? Let's drink this after we eat."
Okay.
She replied in an absent-minded manner as she stared at her father eating his meal without blinking. The very next moment, Scott groaned and crumpled to the ground, clutching his belly. "Scotty, what's going on, honey?" When I ran to him in alarm, he was laying there spasming and foaming up at the mouth. "Ambulance! Ambulance!" I hurriedly brought out my phone and called 911. I called out to my daughter to stay in her room so she couldn't see the shocking scene unfold before her eyes. I looked at her and saw her with tears in her eyes, and I swore I heard her mumble,
Drugs. Drugs.
I grabbed the tummy ache pills for young kids I'd found in the first aid kit and gently pushed her back, urging her to go back to her room. The paramedics soon arrived, and my husband was rushed to the hospital. The paramedics recommended I go along with him, but I told them I would be there later because I had my daughter with me, so they took him to the hospital first. After seeing the paramedics off, I rushed to Zelda's room, only to discover her running up to me crying and nearly tackling me in the tightest hug known to man.
Mommy, I'm sorry. It's my fault.
I didn't understand what she was trying to say. Then she said simple words, trying to explain in detail what happened, trying hard to make me understand.
because Daddy said he was going to put drugs in your food. That's why I switched your food with Daddy's.
When I asked her for some more details, she told me that she switched out our food while Scott was in the bathroom, and I was in the kitchen pantry looking for the first aid kit. I thought back to the conversation between my husband and daughter on the phone the previous night. I couldn't believe the plan had actually taken effect. He must have slipped the drugs into my food somehow while I was in her room, waking her up. It was a downright terrifying, blood-curdling thing to think about. Zelda was bawling at this point, and I wove her fingers through her hair as I hugged her back. Oh, Zelda, darling, I'm so sorry that you were scared. And also, it's not your fault, okay? You did what you thought was right. Thank you for protecting me. You made Mommy very proud today. I know you're going to be okay. And I know that Daddy is going to be okay too. I held her gently as she continued to sob, but I could tell she was starting to calm down. I wove my hand through her hair continuously, and I could feel her shaking. She must have been in a world of pain. I couldn't even begin to imagine her shock when her own father had ordered her to drug her mother. I was more outraged than saddened by my husband's betrayal. I was absolutely furious about the fact that he would willingly put my daughter through this traumatic experience. I felt ashamed that I hadn't realized Scott's true feelings for me, and thus put my beloved daughter through this. I was also ashamed that I had failed to take immediate action in spite of her suffering. If I had had that talk with him the night before, this might not have happened. The thought of the strokes of bad luck that led up to the moment Scott swallowed that mouthful made my heart ache. But I wasn't going to let my daughter get hurt anymore. I was going to punish that man with my own hands. I was determined to do so. Considering the emotional damage taking its toll on Zelda, I left her with my parents, who lived just down the street, and went to the hospital where Scott had been taken. When I arrived at the hospital, I was horrified by the doctor's explanation. He told me that in his stomach there was a very distinct chemical footprint of a drug that is generally regarded as lethal. Fortunately, he survived, but he would have been in serious danger if I had postponed reporting the incident to 911 to a couple minutes later. I immediately decided to divorce my husband. Not only did he attempt to drug me without my knowing about it, which is already grounds for a form of assault, but he also attempted to drug with a lethal drug, which could have definitely killed me. I could not allow my daughter to live with a person who was planning such a criminal thing. Without even visiting my husband's mom, I immediately returned to my parents' house and told them the whole story. They were surprised and furious and pushed me to get a divorce right away. After going to City Hall for some divorce documents, I went to his hospital room with my section already filled in.
Eileen, I collapsed, didn't I?
Yes, right after breakfast. I went straight to the point. I held out the filed divorce papers in front of him. He looked at me as if he was staring at a flesh-eating alien and said,
Are you kidding me? Why the frick are you divorcing me? Explain all this.
What do you mean, explain all this? I really think you're the one who ought to explain what's going on here. My tone was horrifyingly calm and quiet. I confronted him with words that might as well have been point-blank bullets. You put that drug in my breakfast, didn't you?
I don't know what you're frickin' talking about.
He started to swim, clearly indicating I struck a nerve. I continued calmly. They just found a very toxic substance in your system. But my husband, perhaps thinking that they were still not completely sure this was the case, immediately started feigning blissful ignorance.
What are you talking about? I would never do such a thing. And above all else, why in the world should I fall ill because of it? You claim I was trying to drug you, but maybe you're the one that was planning to drug me instead.
I wouldn't do that, now would I? I don't even know where I could have gotten those pills.
Neither do I, Eileen. I'd bet $1 million you found the drugs in my bag and decided to use them on me.
I couldn't believe he just did that. He cut his shouting short immediately and gasped as he put his hand over his mouth. Never was I ever so glad that I had a voice recorder in my pocket, just in case. So you really did have a stash of drugs, huh?
No. You don't understand. That's just...
There's no use in making excuses, Scott Gibb. I have this whole conversation of ours recorded. And also, I've already called the police.
Called the... What? Why would you...
As he said these words, he turned dangerously pale. Almost as pale as when he started having those convulsions after ingesting the drugs. He started sweating profusely.
No. 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 This can't be. You're kidding, right?
He desperately tried to deny the truth that I was telling him, but the door to his room opened, and who came in was like a slap in the face for him. Ah, here they come now. They'll ask you all the questions about the incident, and you'll have to answer honestly. Otherwise, your crimes are going to pile up, and your punishment's going to be a lot worse. Several police officers were now inside Scott's hospital room. 2 of them waiting outside and keeping watch while 2 others discussed between each other before approaching Scott. Yes, indeed. I had called the police before I came to the hospital. I also gave them permission to search our house, and sure enough, when the police collected and tested the corn syrup my husband had been eating, they found the same toxic substance that doctors found in his system. After the drug in the soup and the drug in his system were confirmed to be one and the same, the police visited our house again and searched it for the drug itself. It eluded 5 searching officers for about 10 minutes before one found a small bottle full of the lethal drug in his work bag. He was later taken into police custody as soon as he was discharged from the hospital. With the testimony of my daughter and myself, as well as the recording of my husband's statement that he indeed had drugs in his possession, he was arrested on the charge of alleged attempted assault. According to his statement, he had been having an affair with another woman for some time and wanted to divorce me. However, he was afraid that he would be legally prosecuted if he divorced me in this situation. So, who knows what kind of train of thought transpired in that black head of his. He eventually decided that killing me was the best thing to do. When I heard this story, I was of course absolutely furious, and so were my parents and in-laws. And the fact that he was trying to pin the crime on his own daughter by trying to persuade her into drugging me is something that no normal human being would ever do. My in-laws went to my husband, who was in prison after being found guilty before a jury, and severed their ties to him. I, of course, divorced him and filed for alimony against his affair and child support for Zelda. And, of course, I also filed a claim for alimony against the woman whom he was having an affair with. My ex-husband has been sentenced to prison, and he won't be out for a long time. But when he does, I arranged for a restraining order, legally forbidding him from contacting me and my daughter. After the whole nightmare, Zelda and I fled home and ran away to my parents' house. For a few weeks after the incident, my daughter was completely depressed. But in April, when elementary school started, she seemed to have made some new friends. And nowadays, she often shows her smile again, to my great relief.
Hey, Mommy! Today I played the piano in music class. And Miss Manna praised me, and so did my friends.
That's awesome, darling. That's so cool.
I want to get better and better at the piano.
All right, then. Let's work on that together. When I now see her smile, her immeasurable heartbreak notwithstanding, I'm very determined to take responsibility to heal her heart with my own hands and do what I can to give her life as devoid of stressful things as I can.